everyone. Welcome to the Monaco Streaming Film Festival's Masterclass. And today we're going to be talking about different lenses on diversity and entertainment. And I'm joined by a fantastic guest. We've got Chantel Riley, she's an actress, a children's author, and a singer. Currently the star of Hallmark Media's The Love Club movie series, which is on Hallmark Movies now and the W Network in Canada, and has lead roles in Netflix's Daniel Spellbound and CBC's Frankie Drake Mysteries. So, an astonishingly high caliber guest for us. I'm your host, Gavin Bridge, and today we're going to be discussing diversity entertainment, both from the perspective of Black content, but also the representation of Canadian content, which I think is actually equally applicable for really any English-speaking region that isn't America when we think of how content is made. So, Chantel, thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Gavin, thanks for having me. You kind of laid it all out. Let's see. I started acting, what year is that? 2012 professionally. And my first gig was actually The Lion King in Germany. So I started there and I played Nala on the stage. And then after a year there, I got an opportunity to play Nala again on Broadway for 4 years. And then after Broadway is when I tapped into the whole film and television route, and I booked my first film called Race, which is a Jesse Owen biopic, and then moved on to doing 4 seasons of Frankie Drake Mysteries. I love that show, and I love the girl so much. And then the ball just kept on rolling, and you listed all the other things, and I do a couple video games here and there for all our gamers, and starting to tap into producing. So stay tuned for that as well.
So it might surprise people because you sound American, but you're actually Canadian.
I'm very Canadian, yes. I'm Canadian of Jamaican descent. So if you hear me say certain words like ting, that is why. But I've been living in the States for, oh my gosh, almost 10 years now. So that's why, that's probably why.
Well, I don't sound American, but it's easier for you. I've been here longer. I've been here 12. But you don't say a boot. That's what I mean.
I do not say boot. I do say A though. I will drop an A on you.
So with being Canadian and Black, how easy is it to find roles that reflect that background? Like, are there any stories being written for Black Canadians in general, or
not nearly enough? Canada, yes, is predominantly, I guess, white, maybe. But in Toronto alone, it's the most diverse city, I think, in the world. It's definitely a melting pot with so many different cultures and so many different races. So it's kind of impossible to not have stories to tell and be told on Canadian television, which is something that I know a lot of groups like Real World Canada and BSO is working really hard in changing in Canada.
Is part of that though, and I'm going to jump around in this interview, I think, between the Black representation and Canadian representation, just in case you're like, wow, Gavin's really yo-yoing today. But is part of that because first of all, there's not a lot of just general Canadian stories on TV or being produced in Canada?
That could definitely be a start. Yeah, of course. A lot of our content that we show, whether it's streaming or on our networks, I think majority of it is actually American television. So where we have a beautiful history of Black television in the States, we don't necessarily have that. And not just Black television, but, just stories in general, Black, white, Hispanic. We unfortunately don't have much of that in Canada. So no, a lot of our Canadian stories aren't actually being told. And the ones that are being told are sometimes just limited within Canada, and they don't get as far as maybe an American series would, whether it's just over to America or just internationally in itself.
Yeah, I think the ones that, I think Schitt's Creek was not Netflix, right? But pretty much everything else that you see is that there's a co-production at this point is a Netflix thing that tends to downplay the Canadian side, right? Like I always go back to Working Mums because that's the one I managed to watch, and it's just set in Toronto in the summer, but never ever is the city part of the the setting. It's just like a North American city where it's warm, and that's about so it can travel, right?
Exactly. And I think that's another thing that we have a tendency of doing is just not making it a Canadian story. And I guess when you do it that way, it has a chance of gaining a broader viewership across borders and stuff. So yeah, like Working Moms, we have Kim's Convenience as well, which is really popular, and they were also on Netflix, so that helped as well. So those certain series have gone far. But yeah, Working Moms does not really say, hey, we are in Toronto, Canada. So it makes it easier for them to just go along with that story and just be kind of anywhere at that point.
But Canada in general is kind of a production hotbed, right? Like there's a lot of stuff being made there.
Absolutely. We have so many shows that come across border, and which is, it's great, obviously, because, Canada's making money, and there's certain contracts within unions and between ACTRA or SAG-AFTRA where they have to hire Canadian talent, which is great. So it gives us an opportunity as actors to work on American shows and be seen on these American shows. So there's always something filming in the city, especially in Toronto or Vancouver, especially. There's always something filming. It's not necessarily Canadian content. It's usually something American. I actually just booked something that I have to film in Toronto. That's going to be an American series. So.
And I think this is why I found what we were talking about when we first met so interesting, because this is what you sort of see with other regions too, right? Like there's in the UK, a lot of stuff now that's being produced is not being produced by British producers. It's the Americans coming in. Not that there's anything wrong with the Americans coming in, but it is the Americans coming in and filming different versions of life. I think I read once that you could tell the difference between a British production and a Netflix British production with the slang that was being used, because it tends to be a bit more focused on the international side rather than domestic. So it's, and the other thing that comes to mind is that rule that they're putting in, or that law they're trying to pass in Australia, where 20% of stuff on a streaming network now they're saying must be domestic. So Netflix can't just come in, for instance, and have, here's all of our American shows. They've got to have Australian produced content there. So you're slowly beginning to see this kind of screw turning or backlash a little bit of people in each region trying to find more stories that represent them, which, I hear you on it, because it's true. Like there's very few Canadian shows that come on over here, which is weird, because people will watch an English show with an accent. People watch Luther, right? And Idris Elba sounds, all right, mate, how's it going? It doesn't even sound posh. There's people will tolerate regional accents. It's just, what do you think could be done to make people more likely to commission or produce regional stories?
You know what? It's not that there's a lack of stories to be told or a lack of producers that are willing to tell these stories. It's the lack of funding. So we were just in Ottawa together at that conference, and I was able to meet so many, an array of producers, especially producers of color, that have so many incredible stories to tell, but the money is not quite there, unfortunately. So when it comes to getting a great show off the ground, you have to have good marketing. You don't have good marketing, you don't have the money for the marketing, your show is not going to get anywhere. And I feel like that's something that we in Canada really need to put more effort into. A lot of our networks are government funded, so we depend on the government when it comes to that. Where opposed to the States, they have like a plethora of networks and money and access to money. So it's not a matter of, getting the content done. It's getting it pushed enough and having that support financially to do that. So we need more money. You got any for us?
Me? No. I'd love some myself. I've got plenty of things I would be doing. But it's a good point, because I think it's different to the US model, and actually what you find in other countries that have a link to Britain, because the CBC and everything else is set up very similar to the BBC, right? Publicly funded content. You're never going to be able to compete, like you say, with the big companies who are coming in with these big budgets. But you equally find, I think, that at least domestically, some of these shows, they just need a little bit of love, right? And then they can kind of sprout and bloom, and then perhaps that would be the push that lets more region-focused stories emerge.
Absolutely. I agree. Just need a couple people to believe in us. You know what I'm saying? Believe in what we can produce as Canadians or as Britons, and what we can tell, stories that we can tell about our own hometown. In Toronto, there's a production company called Bay Mill Studios, which is started by Stefan James and Shamir Anderson. And they're actually dedicated to telling not just Black stories, but Canadian stories as well, and putting Canadian talent on the map. You know, we have so many talented people in our country that unfortunately decide to leave. Because in Canada, you hit this glass ceiling, and it's hard to break that. You only get to a certain level where you're just like, well, now what do I do? What more stories can we tell? And if we tell them, who else is even watching? You know, so that's why a lot of us, unfortunately, decide to leave. Because in the States, yes, there is tons of money, and there are tons of shows, and they're not afraid to create these shows and put them on TV and have it be for the Black community or the Latino community or the Asian community, you know what I mean? So they're not afraid to say, oh, there's nobody's gonna be watching it. Well, maybe if you did a proper study of who actually watches what content, then you can understand and decide, okay, yes, there are actually Black people in Canada that actually watch TV. You know, wouldn't mind seeing, for example, a series about, I'm Jamaican, so I'm going to say a Jamaican family, you know, just living or growing up in Toronto, you know, or in Scarborough or parts of Toronto. You know, so it's, if the proper research isn't done and the proper data is not collected, then we're just going to be left on the wayside. And no one's really going to understand and know that, yes, we are here. And yes, we do want to hear our stories. And yeah, we would actually watch it.
Is any of this down to like kind of what I used to see just generally here with how content was being made? Like how to put this delicately? Gatekeepers who are a little bit out of touch and not necessarily understanding the modern consumer and the modern audience.
Absolutely. Yes. Gatekeepers is a word we've been hearing a lot lately. And there are a lot of them that are out of touch. They stick to their formula that they know works and it's been working for a gazillion years. And that's how old some of them are. And not taking the time to, you know, connect with the younger generation, or even like bring them in on them, training them up, mentoring them to one day taking over for themselves. But unfortunately, you know, in the age of greed or nepotism or whatever, they want to just hold on to that as much as possible. So it is more difficult for us to get in there and to tell these stories. But yes, gatekeeping, there are some good gatekeepers that are willing to, you know, give us a chance. They're not all like that, but there are definitely quite a few that are.
So on the note or the topic of gatekeepers, I want to move it towards just like general Black storytelling, so outside of Canada, because we see you're living in America and most of your roles are going to be coming from America now. Do you find that there are, or do you think there's enough authentic Black stories currently being told or in production?
In America?
Yeah.
There are definitely a lot of stories being told. Can there be more? Of course. I'm never going to say, hey, we've had enough of you Black folk on TV. We'll wrap it up here. I'm never going to say that. The more, the merrier.
I'm never going to say that too, because I don't want to get cancelled.
Yeah, we don't want that, okay? Growing up as a kid in the 90s, I was able to enjoy shows like In Living Color and Martin and Fresh Prince, and I feel like that was like, some would say the Renaissance era for Black television. And it was so beautiful to see because I'd be able to turn on TV and see that there was a girl that looked like me, and for many years in the 90s, that's what we got. And then like early 2000s, something happened. They just kind of disappeared. And some may say that some of these networks are just taking advantage, or some would call culture vulturing, the Black community, taking their stories, benefiting off of it, and then moving on. So can there be more? Absolutely. I know we have networks like BET that are pushing stories, with their own network that have been, pushing stories as well. I know Freebie's coming up and they're going to be pushing a lot of stories. I actually did a series that's going to be on there as well called Beyond Black Beauty, which is a story about a Black family that owns a ranch. And we don't really be seeing stories like that. What I love about stories like that is that it's wholesome, it's family content. And I think I would love to see more of that being told on our television.
Well, that's definitely something that you've stolen my questions from my mind, because I did want to ask about that. Like in particular, it feels like the 90s there was, and when you look back at sort of like the libraries that subscription streaming now has, there was a lot of different shows on in the 90s, at least on broadcast TV and publicly available television. Now I don't think there's many feel-good stories being made in general, but there definitely seems to be a paucity of, I mean, you might get an Empire every now and again, but that's not exactly a feel-good show, right? Like it's a different type of show.
It's definitely a drama, and there's definitely a lot of drama series out there when it comes to portraying Black characters. You'll see drugs, violence, sex, all that stuff on certain networks. But I feel like we're definitely lacking in the feel-good stories, just the family stories that we could all sit around and just be like, oh, wow, I feel really good watching this. I think the reason why channels like Hallmark have been going on for so long, have been running for years and making bukus of money, is because people like to feel good. I think we've had years and years of just bad news that we see on the TV over and over again. And it's great to come home and turn on something that actually just makes you feel good. That actually makes you feel like, oh, wow, they're in love and they stay in love at the end. You know what I mean? I know some people it's a little cheesy or a little corny, but sometimes I think we need to see more of that, to be honest, especially when it's surrounding the Black family. You'll go to some countries, and I've seen this happening on YouTube, where you have like social experiments of asking people what they think about Black people, or if they know any Black people, what they think of them. Oh, they're robbers. They're in gangs. I've seen some of this happen on some of these YouTube channels that I follow. And it's like, okay, so that's obviously a problem. And we're seeing how the media is portraying us and how there's a lot of money that goes into shows like that is more violent, or that is, sexual content. And that's anyway, sex sells, is what they say, right? But I would love to see that amount of money be poured into just some good, wholesome content about Black stories. And listen, I watch my drama. I watch my fair share of shoot 'em ups, you know what I'm saying? But sometimes I would just love to just see a beautiful romantic series or a comedy series that just makes you feel good when you turn it off at night and not angry. You know what I mean?
Or anxious, right? Because you made me think even Scandal wasn't exactly a feel-good story, right? Like it was very action-driven and like conspiracies and crazy stuff was going on. It wasn't like something you could just sit down Blackish, maybe the only one in recent times that's actually...
It's a great example. Blackish was great. They had some great storyline, but also were made sure to incorporate some sometimes some political topics in there as well, which I think is great because then it gets the audience discussing it amongst their families as well, or having discussions amongst their friends too. So I think Black is a great show.
That was what I found with the article I did recently on Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, right? Where it was looking at not are you fed up with seeing them or anything like that, but just, okay, did you watch it? How has your awareness changed of what Black women face in society? Because if she can experience difficulties in a very like rich environment, then what does that mean for ordinary people? And sort of seeing that, I think a fifth of people said that they'd spoken about, you know, the struggles that, you know, and they weren't aware of them previously. So there is there is a need for more, I guess, normalizing content, right? Rather than drug deals. I mean, I just saw this morning, what day is it? Tomorrow in the US when we're filming, Snowfall's seeing its last season. That is a show about crack cocaine, right? And dealing it during the epidemic in LA. There's all of the shows on Stars that are basically, it does sell, but I mean, I guess as an actress, do you find, are there limited roles for things that aren't feel good, or do you get a lot of these? Do you get asked to read for a lot of shows that are around these topics that are just, you're like, oh, I'd rather do something more positive?
I have gotten a few auditions for shows like those, and unfortunately, I've had to turn a lot of them down because they required nudity. So that goes into the whole sexualizing of Black bodies as well. And I didn't feel comfortable doing that. And I'm not against anyone that does. That's just that's just where I'm at as an actor. That's just me personally. I don't feel comfortable doing, and I just don't want the story to be about that. And there's some series out there, not just Black series, but just in general, where it's like, let's just put the sex scene in here just because, like, you know, and what's the storytelling behind this? Like, why? It's like, that's when you just know that they're just doing that for the sake of doing that. And so when it comes to doing that with Black shows, for me, it makes me a little nervous because I don't want it to be a sexualizing of our Black bodies and just people getting a chance to watch these shows just to see us naked. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You make me think about like how weird it'd be if I went for a job interview and now get naked for a quick second and you'd be like, what? Like,
yeah, exactly. Again, some people are very okay with that. I'm not there yet. You know, I don't know if I'll ever get there. But just me personally, like, if it's not making the story, if it's not just to make the story better or to not just throw it in there just because, like, I'm not doing it. I'm in this point of my life and in my career where I am okay to turn down things that I just don't feel comfortable doing as an artist. And if it's not part of the storytelling, then it's like, what's the point of doing it at all?
So on that topic of storytelling and gratuitous content, let's talk a little bit about unscripted, right? Because there's obviously some unscripted shows that are Black focused that are a little wild.
Which one?
I mean, all of them. Love and Hip Hop, or Bad Girls Club, or even the Real Housewives that are set in more Black areas than in, you know, like suburbs. I think can focus a little bit more on the dramatic, perhaps is the best way to put it. Are there any or many unscripted like reality shows that are kind of positive for Black audiences, or is it generally falling under those like everyone's going to have a fight and an argument and it's going to be really wild kind of stuff?
Well, when it comes to shows like Bad Girls Club, I mean, Bad Girls Club definitely had white girls on there too, acting crazy. And of course, Housewives, there's Jersey, there's Hollywood, there's all these other ones, and they most certainly be acting crazy too. But I do see that there is a tendency when it comes to the Black unscripted shows that of course they love the drama. I think there was a series called was kind of like Selling Sunset, but like I think the Tampa version or something like that, where it was all Black real estate cast. And I think their show got canceled or something. And I guess it wasn't giving enough drama from what I was hearing in the grapevine. And so they got canceled. Like, okay, so but you just want to see these beautiful Black women being successful and selling homes, and shouldn't it be about that? But I think when it comes to unscripted in general, they love the drama, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They focus on, we want drama, we want some blow up to happen, or something to happen, or whatever the case may be. Because at the end of the day, that's what gets people watching. I can't lie and say I haven't sat down and watched myself. I most certainly have had my share of housewife dramery. That's even a word. But sometimes I catch myself and be like, man, why am I watching this? And why do I enjoy watching this?
Yeah.
It's like yourself too, right?
Well, we all need a little bit of trash, some sort of trashy thing to sort of not necessarily trashy, but something that's easy to distract you, right? Like you don't have to put it, like I've stopped watching all those big heavy dramas. I'm like, I don't need another one of like someone's about to die and it's like 8 episodes exploring how dark they are. You're like, yeah, okay, I get it. Like we need different, so sometimes it's nice to switch off. But you make a good point of, are there enough, I guess, scripted and unscripted positive role models out there at the moment in terms of television? Or well, that's a silly question. Do you think there could be more positive role models? No, but no, we're done. I think we need some negative ones.
Sappy, boring,
Who needs that? No, where's the bad boys?
Right. No.
Are there, I mean, if you think of like what reality can do, like you have like chefs and home improvement people and gardeners and paranormal detectives even. Because that's a genre. I'd love to see you do paranormal shows. I'm just pitching that.
Especially the house stuff. I love watching those, people that come in there renovating the people's houses.
Mm-hmm.
I love that stuff. And I would love to see more like, Black hosts when it comes to that. We could always have more feel good content. There was one series that me and my best friend used to watch, and it was Tia and Tamara Mowry. They had a reality show a few years ago, and we were obsessed with them. And I think we loved it so much because it was just a feel-good show. Like, they were just normal girls. They've been in the spotlight for a long time. They're Hollywood girls. They grew up in the entertainment industry. We watched them on Sister for so many years. But, they were never really in drama or in conflict. And there was something about watching them that made us feel like, oh my God, I want to be their best friend. Like one day we'll be best friends with Tia and Tamara. Because we watched the show and never left there like feeling agitated or stressed. It was always just like fun, funny content. And, it even got, real and serious, but it was never like they're fighting or they're throwing things at each other or anything like that. You know what I mean? It was never really that kind of content on their show. And I would love to see more of that. Uplifting, unscripted series that just make you feel good after watching it.
Well, I think you might be seeing more in general coming out with what's happening in media. I've been speaking to you about this in general, but like there's definitely looks like a big trend in unscripted coming in the next couple of years, both with streaming companies having to cut back their budgets. Doesn't mean they're going to cut back on output. It just means they're going to move to more budget-friendly things, which is unscripted. And then I read this piece recently about how the fact that every broadcaster for the NFL is now spending $1 billion more a year means that they've got to find that money somewhere. And that means, well, like if you love the NFL, it's cool. But if you like dramas on Fox or CBS, you might not have as many of them because they're going to have to cut costs and put into unscripted. So with that, as an actress, I've just said like there's less jobs. It's not necessarily true because, I think the total volume is still going to be greater because of all the streaming services. But do you see like opportunities in unscripted where perhaps before it may have been like, oh well, that doesn't seem so big, but now is anyone talking about it behind the scenes, or is it just more like the media analysts who are like, well, we think this is going to happen?
Oh, like doing more unscripted stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think I've been hearing some things here and there about tapping more into reality series or like I said, unscripted series. I mean, I think that's why you see a lot of some of these actors or performers and stuff doing shows like The Masked Singer and like all these other kind of game shows.
Oh yeah, like hosting. Yeah.
They'll probably do more of that, like the American Idol or what's that one? They're in the chair and they turn the chair around. What's that one?
I have not seen this one.
The singing competition show, and they're all they're sitting in
The
the
Voice,
chair.
maybe?
The Voice, yes.
I had to be honest, it may come as a surprise to everyone. I don't generally watch singing reality shows.
You don't?
I'm a Philistine, I'm afraid.
But yeah, like I feel like they're gonna push more towards that route.
Yeah, because it's still entertainment. And you can still get big names on it, right? Like the Gordon Ramsay one that came on after the Super Bowl.
There you go.
It's crazy because it's just conflict.
Right. Like, oh my God, Jennifer Hudson has her own talk show now. You know what I mean? So like a lot of these entertainers are going to be coming, I think, more into that side of it. Definitely.
So sorry?
So I need my own show.
Well, I mean, yes, I'm trying. I think we'll see. But hopefully you do. I think you'd be a very good host for many things. So you could perhaps do one in Toronto, which would be check a couple of boxes, right? As I think we've got a couple of minutes left. So what do you think are important issues in entertainment that need fixing outside of the obvious ones we have already discussed?
Entertainment. I think just like we talked about earlier, more feel-good stories, I think, need to be on. People are stressed, honey. The people are stressed. And we need to feel better. And I think more inspiring content, something that's more uplifting. More BIPOC stories. Obviously, I'll never say there's not enough, that there's enough. Because at the end of the day, there's a plethora of races out here and there's so many stories to be told. And not to say that if I tell this Black story that you as a white man won't be able to relate. Because as human beings, we do go through certain things, whether it's through family crisis or financial crisis or whatever it may be, relationship stuff. It's still stories that need to be told. It would just be great to just see more individuals of other races to tell those stories, whether you're Southeast Asian, for example, Asian, Black, whatever the case may be. I think just giving more of those stories a chance. I feel like in America, they are starting to really push that more. Obviously, with Black content, Hulu, they just started Onyx, which is dedicated to Black content as well. All Black, is that from Peacock?
All Black is by AMC.
Right, okay, so AMC. You know what I mean? So we have these big networks, streaming networks that are pushing that. I would love to see more of that happen, obviously, with all networks out there, all the major networks, you know what I mean? And not just Black people, like I said, Asian people, you know what I mean, all regions of them, and just pushing more stories to be told. There's so many to be told, and even and not just when it comes to race, but even when it comes to disabilities. I'd love to see more of those stories being told as well, and people with disabilities in more serious, regular, or lead positions with people.
Well, it's a terrible segue because being from Essex isn't a disability, but I do think there should be more Essex shows too. Because literally, you've got Jack from I forgot the name of it. That show, which was terrible, a representation of Essex and people. What was it called? No, the one that won the Emmys anyway, Golden Globes. It's on HBO and it's in its second season, set in Italy, in Sicily, and there's him. Someone on the screen sent me a clip of an Essex girl being blown away recently on a movie, and they're like, "Oh no, it's an Essex girl in the sky." I think you could have.
S Club.
Yeah, there's you could do it for like every region too, right? Like it's really interesting because you kind of you can apply like multiple dimensions to storytelling, and I think we may be at the point soon where we actually start to tell much more complex stories where things used to be a bit more simplified. I think would be a fair way to put it.
Absolutely, bring on storytelling, and you know what? We need to be giving BIPOC writers more of an opportunity as well to tell these stories. When I was working on Frankie Drake Mysteries, I know we have to wrap up, but I just want to tell this story real quick. When I was on Frankie Drake Mysteries, there was a time when the producer came up to me and said, "Hey, like, what do you think we can do to improve?" I said, "Well, you need to have somebody that looks like me in that room." At the time, it was predominantly white writers. And, you know, it's going to be difficult to tell a story from my point of view as a Black woman in the 1920s, because that's what we were set, and not have anyone, you know, being Black, you know, that has had those experiences, whether it's the race or whatever it may be, or even Caribbean, because that's where my parents are from. So we need to have more diversity in the writing room so we could tell these diverse, complex stories, so that everybody could be heard.
Well, I think that's a great sentiment. I just found out it was the White Lotus was the bad representation of Essex people. We're not all like that. I think. Anyway, I've really enjoyed our conversation, Chantel. I hope we can come up with some more to have with you, because it's also really nice kind of peeking behind the curtain from your perspective. So thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us. And hopefully when we speak again, we'll have perhaps some more positive stories to share around representation in television.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.